That night, when my father-in-law called my mom trash and my husband nodded along, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, booked a one-way ticket, and started a paper trail that would turn their world inside out. The champagne glasses were still clinking at the country club, the smell of expensive cologne mixing with my mother's homemade stew she'd brought as a gift. When I realized my marriage wasn't about love, it was about knowing your place. And I was done knowing mine. My name is Nora Caldwell, and I should have seen it coming the moment Harold Whitmore insisted on hosting our delayed engagement celebration at the Stonebridge Country Club. The mahogany panels seemed to lean in, listening, as my mother smoothed her best department store dress, the navy one with tiny flowers she'd bought specifically for meeting Evan's family. "Such interesting decor at your little restaurant," Elaine Whitmore said to my mother, her smile sharp as winter ice. "Mabel's Corner. Isn't it how authentic?" The word hung in the air like a slap. My brother Logan shifted in his chair, oil still faintly visible under his mechanic's fingernails despite scrubbing them raw. Mom had brought her famous beef stew in her good Tupperware, the one she used for church potlucks, and Harold actually laughed when she presented it. "How thoughtful," he said, pushing it aside. "Though we've already arranged dinner with the chef here, he trained at Le Bernardin." He turned to the other guests, his business partners, their wives dripping in pearls. "Mabel here runs a diner. You know the type vinyl seats, coffee that sits all day. The real America. Right." I felt Evan's hand on my knee under the table, not in comfort, in warning. "Dad," Evan said quietly, but there was no force behind it. Harold was already pulling out his checkbook, making a show of writing a donation to the Northfield Valor Fund. $25,000, he announced. "For our veterans. Real money making real change." He looked directly at my mother. "That's probably more than your little place makes in, 3 months?" "Dad, enough." Evan's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm just saying," Harold continued, waving the check so everyone could see. "Money talks. It shows character, shows where you come from and where you're going. Some people understand that. Others." He glanced at Mom's Tupperware. "Others bring beef stew to a country club." The laughter rippled through the room. Polite, cruel, deliberate. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. Logan's jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. "We should go," I said, standing. "Nora, sit down." Evan's grip tightened on my knee. "You're making a scene." I looked at my husband, really looked at him. His eyes darted between me and his father, and in that moment, he made his choice. He gave me that look, the one that said, "Just play along, keep the peace, don't rock the boat." "Your wife seems upset," Harold said, folding the check with theatrical precision. "Maybe this is all a bit much for her. Different worlds. You understand." The room smelled of aged bourbon and fresh roses, of privilege so old it had fermented into cruelty. The chandelier light caught on Elaine's diamonds, on the Northfield Valor Fund logo on Harold's check, the same logo I'd seen on development proposals crossing Evan's desk. I helped Mom gather her things, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. Logan stood when we did, protective, ready to fight if needed, but this wasn't his battle. "Thank you for the evening," I said, my voice flat as a legal document. Outside, the valet brought our car, Mom's 10-year-old Honda, parked between Porsches and Teslas. The rain had started, soft drops on the windshield as I drove them home. The wipers squeaked against the glass, keeping time with my racing thoughts. Mom sat silent in the passenger seat, the Tupperware container in her lap. Logan fumed in the back. "I'm sorry, baby," Mom finally whispered as we pulled up to her house. "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare apologize." I waited until they were inside before I let myself grip the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The rain picked up, hammering the roof, and I didn't cry. Not one tear. By the time I got home, Evan was already in bed, scrolling his phone. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said without looking up. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom paid for by his family's money, decorated by his mother's designer, and felt something inside me calcify into determination. Your father called my mother trash. He didn't use that word. He didn't have to. Evan finally looked at me. It's just how he is. You knew this when you married me. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table at 11:45 p.m. The screen's glow, the only light in the room. My fingers moved without hesitation. One-way ticket to Red Bluffs, New Mexico. 6 departure. The Northfield Valor Fund was registered there. So was the next development deal Harold was pushing through. I'd seen enough papers on Evan's desk, heard enough phone calls he thought I didn't understand. They wanted to talk about money showing character, fine. Let's see what their money actually showed. The morning coffee tasted like cardboard. Evan sat across from me at our granite kitchen island, the same spot where we'd planned our future just 2 years ago. Now he was explaining why I needed to apologize to his father. Just call him, Evan said, pushing his phone across the counter. Say you were emotional. Say Mom's been stressed with the restaurant. Whatever it takes to smooth this over. Will you defend me next time? I asked, not touching the phone. When he insults my family again, will you stand up for me? Evan sighed, that particular exhale that meant I was being difficult. You know how Dad is. He's from a different generation. He doesn't mean anything by it. He meant every word. Nora, please. The development deal in Oak Mesa is at a critical stage. We can't have family drama right now. Family. The word sat bitter on my tongue. I pulled my notebook from my purse, the leather one Elaine had given me last Christmas, ironically, and drew 3 columns. Evan watched, confused, as I wrote people, rights, evidence. What are you doing? Making a list, I said, filling in names. Harold Whitmore, Elaine Whitmore, Russell Pike, their CFO, who always smelled like cigarettes and fear, Greta Voss, director of the Northfield Valor Fund, who showed up at every family dinner with perfectly highlighted talking points about veteran support. Nora, you're being paranoid. Under rights, I wrote public contracts, building permits, charity filings, the prenup amendment Harold had pushed after our small wedding, the one that would protect family assets and cut me off from everything if I damaged the family reputation. I'm being thorough, I said. Evidence county records, 990 forms, email threads, photos of checks, witness statements. Evan stood up, his chair scraping against the tile. I have to get to work. Just think about what I said. We're a team. Remember, after he left, I sat in the silence of our perfect house with its vaulted ceilings and custom fixtures, all of it feeling like a beautifully decorated cage. I opened my laptop and confirmed my flight. Then I called my boss at Grayline Analytics, told her I needed 3 personal days. Family emergency. I said, not a lie. I spent the next hour organizing, downloaded every email I'd ever seen accidentally, every document left open on Evan's computer when he asked me to close it for him. The Northfield Valor Fund's website was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation wounded warriors, flag backgrounds, donation buttons that led to interesting routing numbers. The prenup amendment sat in our filing cabinet, 37 pages of legal language designed to keep me quiet and compliant. Page 23. Subsection 4. Any action deemed detrimental to the Whitmore family business interests or reputation shall result in immediate forfeiture of all marital assets and claims. But whistleblower protections were federal, public records were public, and the truth, when properly documented, was its own form of currency. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Don't worry about last night, honey, I'm fine. Another from Logan. Just say the word and I'll slash his tires. I smiled, the first real smile since dinner. Then I typed back to Logan. No need, I've got something better planned. The central question kept circling in my mind as I packed a small bag. Who is family when blood is used as leverage and marriage is a business merger? I wouldn't tell Mom what I was doing. If this went sideways, she needed plausible deniability. The restaurant was her life's work. and Harold had enough connections to destroy it with a few phone calls to health inspectors and suppliers. At 4:30 a.m., I stood in our bedroom doorway watching Evan sleep. His face was peaceful, untroubled. The Harold's son face, not the husband face. I wondered if he'd ever really seen me as more than an acquisition, a box to check on his way to the perfect life his parents had mapped out. The Uber driver didn't talk on the way to the airport, which suited me fine. Philadelphia International was already busy despite the early hour, travelers pulling luggage toward their gates, toward their purposes. Mine was clear. In Red Bluffs, New Mexico, there was a paper trail. And paper trails, when followed correctly, led to truth. As the plane lifted off at 6:10 a.m., I looked down at the city spreading below Ridgeview somewhere in that sprawl. The country club, Mom's restaurant, all of it shrinking to matchbox size. Harold liked to say money talked. He was right. It was about to say everything. Red Bluffs, New Mexico, was nothing like Pennsylvania. The air was dry enough to crack your lips, and the county records office smelled like dust and old paper, the scent of secrets waiting to be found. The clerk, a woman with turquoise jewelry and knowing eyes, didn't ask why I needed copies of every filing for the Northfield Valor Fund. "That's a lot of paper," she said, feeding documents into the copier. "I'm thorough," I replied, watching each page emerge like evidence in a crime scene. The 990 forms told a story Harold never intended to share. Northfield Valor Fund had distributed exactly $12,000 to actual veterans services last year. But they'd spent $300,000 on administrative costs and community engagement events, every single one happening the week before crucial city council votes in Oak Mesa. I spread the papers across a table in the back corner of the office, mapping connections with highlighters I'd bought at a gas station. Pink for donations received, yellow for distributions, green for timing that aligned with Whitmore & Sons' development proposals. "Excuse me," a voice said. I looked up to find a younger man, maybe 30, with tired eyes and a city council badge. "I'm Diego Alvarez, council secretary. Maria said you were looking into the Valor Fund." I tensed, ready to pack up, but he held up a hand. "I'm not here to stop you. I've been wondering when someone would notice." He pulled out a chair. "Those veteran dinners they sponsor. They happen to use voter registration lists to send invitations. Only registered voters in key districts get fed." My pen stilled on the paper. "That's lobbying disguised as charity." "Yeah." Diego glanced around, then pulled out his phone. "I've got photos from the last dinner. Check the backdrop Whitmore & Sons logo. Tiny, but there. And the presentation they gave about community development. That was 2 days before we voted on rezoning their plot from residential to commercial. I photographed everything he showed me, my product manager brain already organizing the data points. "Would you testify to this?" "I can't. I need this job, but public records are public." He stood to leave, then paused. "The vote transcripts from October 15th last year. Look for the part where Councilman Morrison suddenly changes his position after attending a Valor Fund gala." After Diego left, I worked until the office closed at 5 p.m., then found a motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Orange bedspread, wood paneling, perfect anonymity. I called Rhea Donovan from my laptop, using encrypted video. "I need a legal opinion," I said after explaining what I'd found. "Can I pursue this without violating my prenup?" Rhea, sharp-eyed even through the grainy connection, smiled. "Whistleblower protections override civil contracts when reporting potential fraud. You're not attacking the family. You're reporting possible violations to appropriate authorities. Completely different thing, legally speaking. And if they come after me, then they'd have to admit in court what they were doing. Discovery works both ways." I spent the night creating spreadsheets, cross-referencing donation dates with council votes, matching amounts with zoning changes. The pattern was clear as a constellation once you knew where to look. Every major Whitmore development in the last 3 years had been preceded by a Valor Fund charity event targeting key decision-makers. The genius was in the details. They never gave money directly to council members that would be illegal. Instead, They hosted dinners for voters in those council members' districts, making the politicians look good. They donated to community centers in strategic neighborhoods just before permit hearings. They sponsored youth sports teams whose parents happened to work in the planning department. My phone buzzed at 11:20 p. Evan, where are you? Your office said you took time off. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened another document and email that had been sitting in my screenshots folder for months. Russell Pike to Harold, need to prioritize Valor disbursements from the PR budget for Q3. Oakland Mesa project depends on it. The smoking gun, as they say in movies. Except this was real, and it was my father-in-law's CFO admitting in writing that charity funds were being used as a business expense. I found one more thing before my eyes couldn't focus anymore. Green Tide Consulting, a company that had received $80,000 from Valor for veteran outreach services. The company was registered to one Amanda Whitmore Elaine's niece, who lived in Boston and worked as a yoga instructor. The motel's air conditioner rattled like old bones as I finally closed my laptop at 2 a.m. Tomorrow, I'd drive back to Albuquerque, make official copies of everything, have them notarized, build my paper castle so strong that when it fell on Harold's head, every brick would be stamped with his own signature. He'd said money showed character. He was absolutely right. I returned to Ridgeview wearing contrition like perfume. Evan was waiting at the airport, relief flooding his face when he saw me walking toward him with my shoulders slightly hunched, my expression carefully crafted to suggest defeat. Nora, thank God. I was worried sick. He pulled me into a hug that smelled like his father's cologne. Where were you? I needed to think, I said into his shoulder. You were right. I overreacted. The lie tasted like copper pennies, but his whole body relaxed. On the drive home, I let him talk about how his mother had been concerned and his father was willing to move forward if I could show more appreciation for family traditions. There's a gala next Friday, Evan said, taking the exit toward our neighborhood, the Valor Fund annual fundraiser at the atrium on Willow. Dad wants us all there. United Front. Of course, I said, already thinking about recording devices and legal admissibility. Actually, maybe I could help with the communications, use my skills to contribute. Evan nearly drove off the road in surprise. You want to help with Dad's charity? I want to be part of the family, I said, each word precisely weighted. Really part of it. That evening, I sat at Harold's massive oak desk in his home office while he watched me like a hawk evaluating a mouse. You want to handle digital engagement for the gala? I'm good with data systems, user experience, I said, pulling up my laptop. I could create a landing page for donations, track engagement metrics, show the fund's impact. Harold leaned back, suspicious but intrigued. Evan says you've had a change of heart. I've had a clarity of perspective, I said, which wasn't a lie at all. He waved his hand magnanimously. Fine. Elaine will give you the previous materials. Don't embarrass us. Over the next 3 days, I built something beautiful and terrible, a donation portal that looked professional but ran through my own analytics sandbox, completely legal, fully transparent in the terms of service that no one would read, every click tracked, every referral source logged, the entire flow of digital traffic mapped like a cardiovascular system. I embedded QR codes in the printed invitations, each one uniquely tagged to track which attendees were pushed to donate and when. The brilliance was that it all looked like exceptional volunteer work, a daughter-in-law finally earning her place. This is impressive, Russell Pike admitted when I presented the system at a planning meeting. He was sweating despite the air conditioning, fingers drumming on his folder. The real-time dashboard is particularly useful. Transparency builds trust, I said, noting how he flinched at the word transparency. I reached out to Kara Winslow through her Civic Lens blog's anonymous tip line, using a burner email from the library. Major story brewing, Valor Fund Gala Friday. Bring recording equipment. We'll have documentation ready for verification. Her response was quick. Sources verified through public records. Will attend as covering society events. Standard journalistic ethics apply. Won't publish without documentary proof. Thursday night. I suggested to Evan that we should review the donation flow together. To make sure everything runs smoothly, he sat next to me on the couch, unconsciously providing witness testimony as I walked through the system. See how donations spike whenever there's a pending city council vote, I said, showing him the historical data I'd compiled. Your dad really knows how to time these campaigns. Dad always says timing is everything in business, Evan agreed, not realizing he'd just confirmed intentional coordination. And look, here's where funds get allocated to Greentide Consulting. That's your cousin Amanda's company, right? Yeah, she handles some of the outreach stuff, he said casually. Keep it in the family. You know, I knew. Oh, I knew. Friday afternoon, I stood in the atrium on Willow's ballroom, watching florists arrange centerpieces while Harold barked orders at the catering staff. The space could hold 300 people, and RSVPs showed at least 250 confirmed, all of Ridgeview's political and business elite, gathered in one room. Nora, Elaine approached, her heels clicking on marble. The digital display is set up. I have to admit, your system is quite sophisticated. I learned from watching successful people, I said, meeting her eyes. People who understand how to make things happen. She almost smiled, the closest to approval I'd ever seen. Perhaps you're finally understanding how things work. I'm definitely understanding, I agreed, checking my phone where Ria's message waited. Filing submitted to Inspector General. They'll be attending tonight with state investigators. Warrants ready. I tucked the phone away and smiled at my mother-in-law. It's going to be an unforgettable evening. The ballroom started filling at 7 p.m. I stationed myself near the tech table, tablet in hand, watching the donation tracker I'd built. Every transfer, every pledge, time-stamped and geolocated. The system worked perfectly. A digital web catching every transaction in real time. Kara Winslow arrived at 7:20. Press badge visible. Camera operator in tow. She caught my eye, briefly message received. Harold took the stage at 7:45. Chest puffed with pride. Behind him, my digital dashboard glowed on massive screens, showing donation totals climbing. He had no idea what else it was showing to those who knew how to read it. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, tonight we celebrate not just charity, but community impact. I opened my tablet to the second dashboard, the one I hadn't shown anyone yet, the one that mapped every correlation between Valor Fund events and Whitmore & Sons contracts. It was time for the show. The week before the gala, I became Harold's perfect daughter-in-law. I attended family dinners, complimented Elaine's choice of caterers, even laughed at Harold's jokes about people who don't understand how business really works. Each interaction was a thread in the web I was weaving, and Harold walked into it with the confidence of a man who'd never been caught. You know, Harold said over brandy in his study Wednesday night. I misjudged you. Nora, you're learning. I've had good teachers, I replied. Recording everything on my phone in my pocket, Pennsylvania was a two-party consent state, but I'd started each conversation by mentioning I was documenting the gala planning for posterity, getting verbal agreement from everyone. They thought it was sweet. The key to success, Harold continued, warming to his favorite subject, is understanding that everything is transactional. Take charity work, people think it's about giving back, but it's really about positioning. You donate at the right time, to the right people, and doors open. Like with the Oak Mesa development, I prompted innocently. He chuckled. Exactly. We hosted that veterans dinner in October, and wouldn't you know it, the zoning board suddenly understood our vision 2 weeks later. Timing. Nora. It's all about timing. I smiled, thinking about how that admission would sound in court. Thursday morning, I met Ria at a coffee shop in downtown Philadelphia, far from Ridgeview's prying eyes. She reviewed my documentation with the thoroughness of a surgeon. This email chain is particularly damning, she said, pointing to Russell Pike's messages. He explicitly states that Valor funds are being allocated from the Whitmore & Sons PR budget. That's commingling of funds between a 501c3 and a for-profit corporation. And this, I showed her the green tide invoices. Fraud. Amanda Whitmore never provided any services. These invoices are fabricated. She pulled out a folder. I've prepared the whistleblower complaint. Once filed, you have federal protection against retaliation. File it tomorrow at 5 p.m., I said. I want them served at the gala. Rhea raised an eyebrow. That's theatrical. Harold likes an audience. That evening, I orchestrated one final piece of evidence. During the gala prep meeting, I suggested we do a conference call to coordinate between the Whitmore and Sons team and the Valor Fund team to ensure messaging alignment. Smart thinking. Russell Pike agreed. Dialing in from his office, I started the call with my standard disclosure. I'm recording this for our records. Everyone okay with that? Murmurs of agreement all around. They were too comfortable to care. So, after the council votes next Tuesday on the Riverside development, Russell said, we'll announce the second Valor donation. Right. Make it look like celebration rather than payment. Correct. Harold confirmed. The $40,000 goes out Wednesday morning. Veterans support, of course. Of course, Greta Voss chimed in. I've already got the press release drafted about expanding our meal program. I documented every word, my expression neutral as Switzerland while they planned their crimes in broad daylight. Friday arrived crisp and bright. I dressed carefully a black dress Elaine had bought me, pearl earrings from my wedding, the picture of a respectful daughter-in-law. Evan was nervous, adjusting his tie repeatedly. You sure you're ready for this? He asked. Dad's expecting a lot from the digital display. Everything's prepared, I said truthfully. At the venue, I ran through the technical setup one more time. My public dashboard showed donations and thank you messages, but I had a second screen ready, hidden in a minimized window, the real story of where Valor Fund money went, complete with timelines, vote correlations, and those damning emails. At 6:45 p.m., I called my mother. Are you watching the live stream? Baby, I don't understand why you want me to see this fancy party, she said, but I could hear her opening her laptop. Just watch, Mom. Make sure Logan sees too. Nora, what are you? I love you. Remember that. Kara Winslow had positioned herself perfectly. Camera operator ready. I'd sent her an anonymous package of documents that morning, enough to verify my claims independently. She'd texted from a burner phone. Holy shit. This is real. At 7:50 p.m., Harold was 3 minutes into his speech about giving back to those who gave everything when I saw them. 2 people in dark suits, standing at the back of the ballroom. Not guests. Their eyes swept the room with professional assessment. The investigators. I opened my tablet, fingers hovering over the screen switch. Harold was building to his crescendo, talking about the next phase of Valor Fund expansion, how they'd be partnering even more closely with local government to serve veterans' housing needs code for his Riverside development. And now, Harold announced, I'd like to invite my daughter-in-law Nora to share the impact metrics she's compiled. Nora, would you join me? I walked to the stage, tablet in hand, my heartbeat steady as a metronome. The spotlight was warm on my face as I approached the podium. Thank you, Harold, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. I've indeed compiled some fascinating metrics about the Valor Fund's impact. I clicked my tablet. The main screen changed, but it wasn't the donation dashboard they expected. The spreadsheet that appeared on screen was beautiful in its simplicity. 2 columns, Valor Fund events, and Whitmore and Sons contract awards. The dates aligned perfectly, like dancers in formation. October 15th, Veterans Dinner in District 3. I read calmly. October 29th, Whitmore and Sons awarded Oak Mesa Development. November 3rd, Valor Fund sponsors. Thanksgiving meals in District 7. November 18th, Riverside zoning approved. The ballroom had gone cemetery quiet. Harold's face shifted from confusion to rage, the color rising from his collar like mercury in a thermometer. Technical difficulties, he said, reaching for my tablet. Nora, there seems to be... I stepped back, continuing. The really interesting part is the funding flow. Click. New slide. Russell Pike's email from March explicitly states that Valor donations should be prioritized from the PR budget for Q3 development. That's corporate funds being funneled through a charity for tax benefits. Turn it off, Harold hissed, but his microphone was still live. Everyone heard the threat in his voice. And then there's Greentide Consulting. Another click. Amanda Whitmore's yoga studio Instagram appeared next to Greentide's $80,000 invoices. Veteran Outreach Services, apparently conducted during warrior poses in Boston. The investigators were moving through the crowd now, badges visible. Kara's camera operator had shifted position for a better angle. Phones were coming out across the ballroom, everyone recording, everyone witnessing. This is defamation. Harold roared into his mic. This is lies and this is your signature, I said, displaying the check from the country club night, the one you waved around while calling my mother's cooking trash. You said money shows character. Harold, you were right. Evan stood up from his front row seat, his face pale. Nora, what are you doing? What you should have done, I said, looking directly at him, standing up for what's right instead of what's easy. The lead investigator reached the stage. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Inspector David Torres with the State Attorney General's office. We need you to come with us. We have a warrant to preserve all documents related to the Northfield Valor Fund. This is insane. Harold's composure cracked completely. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've built? We know exactly what you've built, Torres replied, pulling out handcuffs as Harold tried to push past him. I played the audio then, crisp through the ballroom sound system. Harold's voice from our planning call. The $40,000 goes out Wednesday morning. Make it look like celebration rather than payment. Russell Pike tried to run. He made it 3 steps before the second investigator intercepted him. Greta Voss sat frozen in her chair, clutching her pearls like prayer beads. You recorded us? Evan's voice cracked from the floor. You were wearing a wire. No wire needed, I said. I told everyone I was recording for gala documentation. You all agreed. It's called consent. The screen changed one more time. A simple message. All documentation has been provided to state and federal authorities. Full records are available for public inspection through the Freedom of Information Act. Elaine stood up, her dignity wrapped around her like armor. You've destroyed us. No, I said, setting down the microphone. You destroyed yourselves. I just kept the receipts. The ballroom erupted, guests fleeing or pushing forward for better video. Kara Winslow speaking rapidly into her camera, already composing her exclusive. The investigators leading Harold away, his protests echoing off the marble. I walked off the stage toward Evan, who stood shell-shocked among overturned chairs. 3 days ago, you told me timing is everything, I said quietly, so only he could hear. You were right about that, too. Our marriage is over, he said, as if just realizing it. Our marriage ended the night you chose your father's cruelty over my mother's dignity. I pulled the wedding rings off my finger, the engagement diamond Harold had picked. The band Elaine had selected and placed them in Evan's palm. The prenup's void, by the way, I added. Clause 17 criminal activity by either party nullifies all provisions. Your lawyer can explain the details. My phone buzzed. Mom, Nora Catherine Caldwell, what have you done? Then, immediately after, never mind, Logan says to tell you that you're a badass. Language his, not mine. Come home. I left through the service entrance, avoiding the chaos of the main ballroom. The investigators had crime scene tape going up, sealing the makeshift office where the Valor Fund had been collecting checks all evening. Every donation from tonight would be evidence. In the parking lot, I could hear sirens approaching more investigators, probably forensic accountants who'd spend months unraveling every thread. Kara Winslow's first post was already live, breaking major charity fraud exposed at gala. I sat in my car for a moment, hands steady on the wheel. Through the atrium's windows, I could see the blue and red lights reflecting off champagne glasses, turning the whole scene into a kaleidoscope of consequences. My phone rang. Rhea, the Inspector General's office wants to interview you Monday morning. she said. You're the primary whistleblower. Protected status. Full immunity for cooperation. I'll be there. Nora, you did the right thing. I did the necessary thing, I corrected, starting the engine. As I drove away, I thought about Harold's words that night at the country club. Money talks. He'd said, shows character, shows where you come from and where you're going. He was absolutely right about that. The atrium on Willow's ballroom looked like a snow globe someone had shaken too hard, all glitter and chaos. No peace. The string quartet had stopped mid-waltz, their bows frozen as if time itself had paused to watch Harold Whitmore's empire crumble. Ladies and gentlemen, Inspector Torres announced from the stage I'd just vacated, his badge catching the chandelier light. This is now an active investigation scene. Please remain seated until we've taken your contact information. The room erupted in expensive panic. Mayor Richardson tried to edge toward the kitchen exit. City Councilman Morrison sat pale as paper, probably calculating how many Valor Fund dinners he'd attended. The society photographers who'd come for glamour shots were now documenting a crime scene, their flashes creating a strobe effect across Harold's handcuffed wrists. "This is entrapment!" Harold shouted, his voice cracking like ice under pressure. "That woman, my son's wife, she set this up. Mr. Whitmore." Torres cut him off. "You have the right to remain silent." But Harold had never been good at silence. Even as they led him toward the exit, he kept talking, kept digging his hole deeper. Those donations were legitimate. Every contract was earned. The veterans received $12,000 last year, I said, my voice carrying across the ballroom without the microphone. Out of 800,000 raised. Where did the rest go? Harold. The room turned to me like sunflowers to light. I stood by the service door, my black dress making me look like I was already at his funeral. "You want to know about character?" I continued, stepping forward. "My mother served real meals to real veterans every Tuesday for 15 years at her restaurant. Free of charge, no tax write-offs, no photo ops, no city contracts in return. That's character." Elaine stood rigid as a mannequin, her perfectly styled hair beginning to wilt under the heat of scandal. "You've ruined everything," she said, her voice arctic. 40 years of building our reputation." "Your reputation was built on fraud," Kara Winslow interjected, pushing through the crowd with her camera operator. "Mrs. Whitmore, can you comment on your niece's involvement with Greentide Consulting?" Elaine's face went from pale to ashen. That's not, ma'am. We'll need you to come as well," a second investigator said, approaching with another set of handcuffs. "You're listed as secretary of the Valor Fund." The sound Elaine made wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob, something between, like silk tearing. They cuffed her with the same efficiency they'd used on Harold, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light one last time before disappearing behind her back. Russell Pike had already been escorted out, but his assistant, a young woman named Jennifer, approached me with tears in her eyes. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "The books never made sense, but I needed the job. I have kids. Give everything you know to the investigators," I told her. "Full cooperation. You were just following orders, but now you can follow the truth." Evan hadn't moved from his spot among the overturned chairs. He looked like a man watching his house burn from the inside, which, metaphorically, he was. "How long?" he asked when I approached. "How long were you planning this?" "Since the moment you chose silence over standing up for my family." "I could have protected you," he said, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd thought I'd married before I realized that man had never existed. "Protected me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Like you protected me at the country club, like you protected me every time your father made comments about my background. You weren't protecting me. Evan, you were protecting yourself." My phone buzzed. The live stream comments were pouring in. Logan had written, "That's my sister Mom says come home now. She's making your favorite." Then another text, from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Diego Alvarez, watching the stream." The whole council is meeting emergency session tomorrow. Thank you for doing what we couldn't. The investigators were processing the room methodically, taking names, checking phones, seizing the donation box that had been accumulating checks all evening, each piece of evidence handled with latex gloves, each donor now a potential witness. Mr. Whitmore, Torres addressed Evan, we'll need you to come in for questioning as well. He didn't know, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. Evan was oblivious, not complicit. Check the records, Harold kept him out of the loop. Torres looked skeptical, but made a note. Evan stared at me, confusion mixing with something that might have been gratitude if it hadn't been too late for that. Why? He asked. Because unlike your family, I don't destroy people just because I can, only when I must. I turned to leave, but Harold's voice stopped me one more time. He was standing by the police car outside, visible through the glass doors, still performing for an audience that no longer cared. You think you've won? He shouted. You think this changes anything? I'll be out by morning. My lawyers will destroy you. I walked outside, past the gathering crowd of reporters, past the curious onlookers with their phones raised. When I reached Harold, the officers paused, perhaps curious what the whistleblower would say to the man she'd brought down. I leaned in close enough that only he and the officers could hear. Remember what you said about money showing character, I whispered. You were right, and tonight, everyone saw exactly what kind of character your money built. His face went purple, veins standing out like rope under skin. But I was already walking away, behind me. I heard the car door slam, the engine start, the sirens fade into the distance, carrying Harold and Elaine Whitmore toward a future they'd never planned for. My Honda sat alone in the far corner of the lot, humble and reliable, just like the family that had raised me. As I drove away, I passed 3 more police cars heading toward the atrium, their lights painting the night in shades of justice. At exactly 10:45 p.m., I pulled into my mother's driveway. The kitchen light was on, warm and yellow, and I could see her silhouette at the stove. Logan's truck was there too, parked crooked like always. Inside, the smell of beef stew filled the air, the same stew Harold had mocked, now simmering like a victory song. Mom didn't say anything when I walked in, just pulled me into a hug that smelled like onions and unconditional love. You did what you had to do, she said into my hair. I did what was right, I corrected. And for the first time since that night at the country club, I let myself cry. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of relief, of recognition that sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served with receipts, properly documented and legally filed. The rain had started again as I stood outside the atrium, watching the last police car disappear into the night. The parking lot was emptying. Designer heels clicking frantically toward luxury cars, everyone desperate to distance themselves from the Whitmore catastrophe. Evan stood by his Tesla, keys in hand but not moving, like he'd forgotten how to leave. Our eyes met across the wet asphalt, and for a moment, I saw him clearly not the husband who'd failed me, not Harold's son, just a man realizing his entire life had been built on someone else's lies. Nora, he called out, his voice barely audible over the rain. I stopped but didn't turn around. What, Evan? What am I supposed to do now? The same thing I did, I said, finally facing him. Choose. Stand for something real or keep standing for nothing at all. I left him there, rain soaking through his expensive suit, and drove to my mother's restaurant. The neon sign reading Mabel's Corner flickered in the darkness, but inside, the lights were blazing. Mom was at her usual spot by the stove. Logan sat at the counter, and there were 3 bowls of beef stew waiting. The news is already everywhere, Logan said, showing me his phone. Look at this: Harold Whitmore arrested, Valor Fund fraud exposed. You're trending. I'm not named, I said, noting how the articles mentioned only a whistleblower with inside knowledge. You know they'll figure it out, Mom said, setting down her ladle. Small town like Ridgeview. Everybody'll know by breakfast. Let them know, I said, tasting the stew. It was perfect rich, honest, made with love instead of ulterior motives. I'm not hiding from the truth. That's what they did. My phone buzzed. A text from Rhea. Federal prosecutors want to meet Tuesday. This is bigger than Pennsylvania. Whitmore and Sons had similar setups in 3 other states. I showed them the message. Logan whistled low. You didn't just take down Harold, you took down an empire. An empire built on lies deserves to fall, Mom said, surprising us both with her fierceness. Then, softer. You sure you're ready for what comes next? I thought about it, stirring my stew, listening to the rain against the windows. Tomorrow, my name would be everywhere. Evan would file for divorce. The Whitmore's lawyers would try to discredit me. There would be depositions, trials, testimony. But tonight, I sat in my mother's restaurant, eating the food Harold had called trash, surrounded by the family he'd deemed unworthy, and I felt richer than I'd ever felt in that perfect house with its vaulted ceilings and designer furniture. I kept copies of everything, I said. Every email, every document, every recording. They can try to come after me, but the truth is a stubborn thing. Once it's out, you can't stuff it back in. The door chimed, and Kara Winslow walked in, shaking rain from her umbrella. Ms. Caldwell, I know it's late, but I wanted to thank you personally. This story, it's going to change everything. The state attorney general is already calling for a full audit of all charitable organizations with government contracts. Good, I said. That's the point. Harold was right about one thing: money does talk, but it shouldn't be the only voice in the room. Sir, Kara looked around the restaurant, taking in the vinyl seats Harold had mocked, the simple tables, the handwritten menu board. This place has more integrity in one salt shaker than the Whitmore Empire had in its entire operation. After she left, we sat in comfortable silence. The rain kept falling, washing the night clean. At exactly midnight, Mom flipped the sign to closed, and we headed home together, Logan following in his truck. As I lay in my childhood bed that night, staring at the ceiling I'd stared at as a girl dreaming of bigger things, I realized something I'd gotten: those bigger things. The fancy house, the country club membership, the designer life, and none of it had been worth the price of my silence. My phone lit up with one last message, from a number I didn't recognize. Thank you. My father is a real veteran who never saw a dime from Valor Fund. Tonight, you gave us justice. I smiled in the darkness. Harold had stood on that country club stage, waving his check, declaring that money showed character. He was absolutely right. It showed his character corrupt, cruel, convinced that wealth could wash away any sin. But he'd forgotten something crucial, something my mother taught me while making beef stew in a small kitchen, something that no amount of money could buy or sell in America. In this land of laws and paperwork and receipts, a single person with the truth and the courage to tell it could bring down an empire. All it took was keeping the receipts, following the trail, and refusing to be silent when they expected you to smile. The rain stopped just before dawn. I stood at my window, watching the sun rise over Ridgeview, painting everything gold. Somewhere across town, Harold was in a holding cell. Evan was probably with his lawyers. The Whitmore and Sons offices would be wrapped in crime scene tape, and I was free. Not rich, not connected, not part of their world anymore, but free. In this country, I whispered to the morning light. A piece of paper and an official seal protect those who dare to defend their boundaries. The beginning was over. The real work was about to begin. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Nora's position? Your stories and perspectives make this community special. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply keeping the receipts.